You're listening to a Roddenberry podcast.
Well, welcome to Mission Log Engage, a Roddenberry Star Trek podcast. I'm John Champion.
And I'm Norman Lau.
And this is the show. It's the one specifically for the YouTube audience so that we can actually, you can watch us respond to your feedback in an unedited and unexpurgated discussion. And yeah, you know where to find it. Well, hopefully you found us because you're watching this, youtube.com/Roddenberry Entertainment. Just look at the Mission Log Engage playlist. So, Norman, I think everybody knows the score now. We can just kind of jump in, right?
Oh yeah, it's time for some jazz, baby. It's time for some jazz.
All right.
In the tune of Warp 5, 6, 7, 8.
That I will see that's the kind of thing like they can get away with on lower decks. You really can't get away with in Picard. But I'd like to hear a little more jazz slipped into Riker's lingo on Picard.
And Riker can do that. You know he can.
Yeah. So kicking off the week, we have an email here from Brian. And tell you what, why don't you do the honors here, Norman?
Oh, John, you do me too much honor, really. But I will. Thank you very much for letting me lead off this week's discussion. So this is an email from Brian that came in from missionlog@roddenberry.com. Hi, guys. I'm not a quote-unquote comment section type of person, so I thought that this was a better way of relaying my comments to you. I've been listening to the podcast for years and enjoy it. However, I have had some concerns lately, which were exemplified by this week's Field of Fire episode. They mainly relate to the question of whether an episode, quote unquote, holds up and how that standard has shifted. It seems that the standard for whether an episode holds up has morphed from an objective analysis of whether it, quote unquote, stands the test of time. In other words, is not culturally outdated and is well produced, /acted, /written, such that the passage of time has not rendered the episode unwatchable, to a more subjective standard of whether or not you liked the episode. This has been rather pronounced with DS9, where it feels you are holding these episodes to a higher standard than you did with TNG or TOS. This is especially noticeable given that the average DS9 episode is better acted, /produced, /written than the average TNG/TOS episode. Second, Norman stated in this week's episode that the test for whether it stands the test of time is something to the effect of, quote, if you remove it from the canon and such removal does not affect character growth, unquote, then it has not stood the test of time, stating, quote, if you pull it out of the timeline, what does it change? Nothing, end quote. Clearly, this cannot be the standard. Indeed, applying the standard to TNG would mean only about 25 episodes has stood the test of time, as most were episodic and did not impact character growth. This would be the same would be true of Voyager. Anyway, this is of course your show, but I did want to share my concerns as I have found myself frustrated by the nature of the analysis fairly often over the past year. All the best.
Cool. And thank you, Brian, for that comment. Actually, I emailed Brian back right away and I said, you know what, this is perfect for Engage. So hopefully, Brian, you are catching this as well. And I'll kick it off just by saying you're right. Yeah. So one of the things early on about Mission Log was in trying to hammer out what the format would be. You know, we knew that we had to have this, ultimately, the discussion about the morals, meanings, messages. That would be the heart of the show. It's just trying to figure out what is it all trying to say in the end. And then all the other stuff like the trivia and the little fun observations, those just kind of fell into place. And then that other part that you're keying in on here, does it hold up? Well, yeah, when we started with TOS, it was specifically about, does this production, this 50-year-old production, does it stand up? And that could mean as a, as in terms of production value. It could mean in terms of the script. It could mean in terms of a number of things. But that obviously is a much easier discussion to have when you're talking about something that's 50 years old. By the time we get up into late next gen and certainly into DS9, Like DS9 as a show with tremendous production value. I mean, those sets are beautiful. Their cast is incredible. Generally speaking, like the quality of dialogue and the development of character arcs, usually always top notch. But this part of Mission Log is something that I feel very strongly about keeping extremely subjective and extremely loose because we assume that production value will be high going forward. We assume that, it's not getting worse as it's made. And Mission Log by design is not about, ranking Star Trek. And that was something that people asked early on, like, "Oh, are you going to do the top 10? Are you going to do this? And how does this one compare to the other one?" And I never wanted to get into that
Mhm.
because the discussion is just really about the ideas in Star Trek. So I kind of look at when we get to that point in the show, I always look at it as, well, do I like it or not? Would I recommend it to someone or not? Or do I feel like there's some element of this episode that takes me out of it, therefore I can't really recommend it? Or I feel like just as as a slice of TV, maybe it worked well for an audience in 1998, maybe it doesn't so much now. And there could be any number of reasons for that. So I try really hard when we get to that part of the show to state my reasons for why I got to the answer that I did. I don't know. I mean, do you, when you get to that part of the show, Norman, do you kind of approach it the same way, or are you being maybe a little more objective than I am? What are you
Well,
looking at?
I think with the part of this email that that brings up my standard of if you remove it from canon, because I did say that and I stand by it.
Hmm.
I think that dynamic in Mission Log is something that obviously has changed from when, say, listeners were listening to it from the beginning with you and
Hmm.
Ken, right up until when I came in at season 4 for Deep Space Nine, because obviously I'm not Ken. And secondly, he had a completely different take on how episodes either withstood the test of time or what morals and meanings and messages he was able to find in an episode, because
Hmm.
he and I are different people. We have different experiences. We're going to see things differently, as are all of you in the audience. So I do believe, though, that maybe I might be unfairly levying the quote unquote serialization
Mm.
aspect of Deep Space Nine a little too unbalanced in my criticisms, because from what I understand, Deep Space Nine fans have always lauded this series as being the most serialized series on TV at the time. I would disagree with that, saying that Babylon 5 was,
Hmm.
but because this is the first true serialized Star Trek series that was on TV at the time, I can completely understand that justification. So I think that every single time I see an episode in Deep Space Nine, or at least on my tenure here in Mission Log, I'm expecting to really be uh, engrossed in that serialization, from seeing things episodically tying together narratively, aside from these one-offs, especially in the 7th season where Field of Fire is in. So maybe I might be just being a little too overtly critical about that aspect of Deep Space Nine. But I do believe that unless there's something that's absolutely critical to an episode where you can afford to pull it from the narrative and not have it affect the overall structure of the story, then yes, it's definitely objectively one way or the other. It either can stay in there or it
Hmm.
doesn't matter. And that's how you get to these high ranking best of lists, right?
Sure.
These are the episodes
Sure.
that, yeah, these, if you take these, say, 16 episodes of season 7 and cast out like some of the ones that aren't really as strong or not strong at all, those 16 episodes are the narrative,
Yeah.
objectively
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
subjectively.
Right. I mean, look. Mission Log, just as Star Trek has changed, Mission Log has and will change depending on the series that it is presented with. I mean, there was a time early on in DS9 that we even debated: do we just drop the whole, what's the moral meaning message, and does the moral meaning message hold up? Because that was something that felt very at home with TOS and with early TNG. And I lobbied hard against just dropping that entirely, because I felt like, well, Star Trek as a whole is still this thing that has a point of view, or at least is exploring points of view that have to do with morality and ethics. And, that really is the heart. That we definitely would not be doing Mission Log if we just never discussed that. So, yeah, that specific part of the podcast has evolved a little bit, but we will try very hard to always express what the reasoning is for when we get to that. And to be honest, like, that to me is the easiest part of the podcast to do, because we've done all the hard work, we've written all the tough, and now we're just saying, now it's just like the gut reaction. Does this work for you or no? Does it hold up or no? Would you put this in front of somebody or no? And that is the easiest decision at all. That's where we really do get to put on the critic hat and go with it. So, yeah.
So hopefully, Brian, that assuages some of your concerns, and we do hope that you continue to listen to us as we move forward, in our coverage of the rest of Deep Space Nine, then onto Voyager, then onto Enterprise, then onto other things.
Everything.
But we will be here for that, and hopefully you'll be here for that too.
Yeah, and you know where to catch us, youtube.com/Roddenberry Entertainment. Look for the Mission Log Engage playlist. Send us your comments, missionlog@roddenberry.com. You can find us on Facebook and Twitter at Mission Log Pod. And remember, we may engage with your comments on the air.